All right, great. Hello everyone. Yeah, my name is Adam Lang from Alcove Insights. So what we're going to do today is talk about flattening your data in web intelligence. This is kind of all about creating clean, consolidated, concise reports. And for any of you who have done any kind of report development, you know those sorts of issues that you might run into from time to time where you need to create a report that has, say, a list of customers or a list of products or a list of regions or whatever it is. And you need to show just one record per one record per customer or one record per product or whatever it is. But perhaps the data that you're bringing into your report is creating these situations where you've got customers listed multiple times or products listed multiple times. But your users don't want that. They want to see that data flattened, or they want to pivot that data or kind of consolidate it so that you've got one record per customer and then all of these different attributes listed as columns. So we're going to talk about some solutions for that. Now, there isn't just one particular solution for this. There's many different ways you can get at this, and it's all situational. So it's all going to depend on the type of data that you have, the shape of that data, how it's coming in, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go through some various situations of cases where you've got kind of duplicate data or repeating data, and look at various ways in which you can flatten it. We'll look at some ways in which you can use cross tables, formulas, ways you can configure universe measures to flatten out data. We'll look at some tricks there, and we'll also look at some SQL solutions as well, leveraging the freehand SQL option of web intelligence. All right, so yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so hopefully you can see my business objects screen here. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. All right, so what we've got internally here is a database of kind of fictitious college information. So there's this fictitious college called West Coast College, and we have a database about West Coast College. It just contains information about students at this fictitious college, the courses in which they're enrolled in, their grades, degrees they may have earned, etc. Okay, so let's take a look at this first situation. Let's say you've got something here where you can see here on the screen, we've got a list of students. We can see that's this column right here. So we can see the list of students. We can also see their residency. And then we can also see the semesters in which they were enrolled and the number of credits they took during each semester. But notice though in this table how we've got a little bit potentially of a formatting issue, because each student, if they were enrolled in multiple semesters, is listed multiple times. So for example, take a look at Aaron Bummer here. That student is listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times. And why is that? Because they were enrolled in 5 different semesters. Okay, so they were enrolled in 5 different semesters. So the report isn't wrong, it's just reflecting how the data is stored. But sometimes you don't necessarily want it in that format, because when you've got the data in this format here where each student is listed multiple times, depending on how you're going to use the report, that kind of formatting can be very cumbersome. So it might be cleaner, easier to read, easier to analyze if each student is listed just once, and then you kind of like their individual semesters in which they were enrolled are presented as columns. Okay, so this is kind of just our first scenario of flattening data. All right, so how is this going to look? Well, I'm going to go ahead and go into design mode. And the first solution that we're going to look at is leveraging cross tables to do this. So again, we're starting with one table where each student is listed multiple times. We want to flatten this data. We want to flatten it so that each student is listed just once. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of this table here. And using the Report Elements tab on the top toolbar, I'm going to add in a cross table. So I'm just going to click the cross table icon and drop it into my report. So I'm going to go over to my available objects, and I'm going to grab first the field for name. This is the name of the student. And I'm going to pull that over into my cross table. Perhaps I want other attributes about the student. You noticed in my original table I had residency, so maybe I want to include that in my table as well. Now, I want, remember, we want to see each student listed just once. Even if they were enrolled in 10 semesters, we want them listed just once. So we're going to achieve that by taking our field semester, and we're going to drag that into the column or the kind of horizontal axis part of the cross table. All right, so now I've got a column for each semester. And I still need to know how many credits the student was enrolled in each semester. So I've got this field, total credits enrolled. I'm going to drag that in to the data portion of the cross table. All right, so now I'm finished. I could kind of clean it up if I want, sort of format it a little bit better. I could add totals on the right-hand side or totals at the bottom or whatever it is. But essentially, this would be the solution. So we started off with a very potentially cumbersome table where we had each student listed 3, 4, 5 or more times. But now we've used a cross table to consolidate that. Each student is listed just once, and we're clearly able to see which semesters they were enrolled in and how many credits they took during those semesters. So having this sort of format makes it easier to read, potentially, but also allows you to do some analysis that is some just kind of easy visual analysis that would have been more difficult to do in its kind of sort of raw duplicated state, if that makes sense. Okay. So depending on the type of data that you need to flatten, the cross table solution is a good dynamic solution. The thing that I do like about the cross table is that notice that the columns are all dynamic. So as time goes on and as more semesters are added to the database, this cross table will accommodate that. It'll just become increasingly wide to accommodate the additional semesters. So it's very dynamic, very simple to build. All right, so that's one scenario, cross table, easy to work with, but that's not going to work in all situations. So let's take a look at some other scenarios. All right, so let's think about this table here. Here in this particular tab of the report, I'm looking at a list of graduates. So I can see their name here, that's their name. I can see their location, their city, their state. And then I can see anytime that the student graduates, I can see what they graduated in, like what degree did they earn. Now, most students might just complete one degree, but some students will complete multiple degrees, and that's what's going to create this kind of duplication. So some students might be listed multiple times. Say, for example, Adam Engel. Adam Engel is right here. This is person ID 70. And so this particular student completed 2 degrees, an associate degree in neurobiology and a certificate of medical scientist. And so there are other people in here who might be listed multiple times, like Austin Bryce, etc. So some people are listed just once, others are listed multiple times, but this is another situation where we need to kind of consolidate and flatten the data. So what we want to see is just one record per student with columns showing all of their degrees they may have earned. Okay. So we're going to look at another trick here. So this won't involve cross tables. This is going to be a formula-based solution. And this is what you may have used this before. This is what I call a min-max trick. Okay, so this is using the min or minimum and max, maximum functions in Web Intelligence to flatten the data. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at how this works. The first thing I'm going to do is this degree and major column. I'm going to go ahead and clear that out because I'm going to plug another formula into here. But notice that when I clear this column out, those students that were listed multiple times will be collapsed. They'll just be listed once. So for example, Adam Engel will be listed just once. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out that that column. Adam Engel now is listed just once. Again, just because there's no data in the table that would cause Adam Engel to be listed multiple times. So we've already kind of achieved that flattening. But now what we're going to do is we're going to add a column here that says something like maybe degree number 1. And I'll add another column that says degree number 2. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to plug their first degree into the degree number 1 column, second degree into the degree number 2 column. So we've kind of taken that data that was listed vertically. We've sort of rotated it 90 degrees so that the data is listed horizontally and thereby is flattening the data. Each graduate listed just once. So how do we achieve that? Well, again, this is that min-max trick I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to put my cursor into the data portion of this degree number 1 column. I'm going to open up the formula and I'm going to say, give me the min or the minimum value of the degree field, which is right here. So give me the minimum value of the degree and major field. All right, so that plugs in there. You'll now notice Adam Engel still listed just once, but I only see one of his degrees. So in degree number 2 column, I'm going to say, give me the max value of the degree and major column. Okay, so the max value of the degree and major column. All right, so now Adam Engel still listed just once, but I see his degree number 1 was associate in neurobiology, and I see that his degree number 2 was a certificate in medical scientist. So that's achieved that aspect of it. But notice that those students who just had 1 degree, their 1 degree is being listed multiple times. It's just being duplicated. So we want to get rid of that. So you can see here this first person, Aaron Bummer. Aaron completed just 1 degree in Associate of Product Design Engineering Technology. So we don't need a value in the degree number 2 column. So we're just going to add a little if statement into our degree number 2 column to only display a second degree if the student had 1. So here's how we do that. Or here's one option. Yes.
Hi, Adam. And
yeah.
As you're going through this, you also had 2 people ask the same question, which is, what if they had more than 2 degrees or 3 degrees? What would you do? So maybe you could address that while you're talking.
Yeah, definitely. That's yeah, I want to get to that because that's one of the big limitations of this min-max trick. So there's some additional kind of tricks that we can use that I'll talk about that'll allow you to capture those additional values. Because yes, sometimes they're not going to just have 2 degrees or 2 products or 2 purchases or whatever it is. So yes, we'll definitely look at that. But here we want to clear out degree number 2. So if the student had only 1 degree. So we're going to add a little formula here that says only display a degree number 2 value if it's different from degree number 1. So this is just one way of doing it. But what you can do is you can say if the max degree value is not equal to the min degree value, only in that case do I want to display the max degree value. So if I make that little tweak to my degree number 2 column, then I've got exactly what I want. Only those students who had multiple degrees populate in the degree number 2 column. Now, in this particular data set, I happen to know, because I built it, that each student only has 2 degrees, but that's not always the case in practice. Sometimes a student will have 3 or 4 different degrees, or whatever it is in your data set. They might have 50 purchases, or a manager might have 30 different employees under them, or whatever it is that's causing that duplication. So we have to look at some different ways to kind of further disaggregate their attributes. All right, so let's take a look at another option that we can use to kind of further disaggregate this. So one option that we can explore is kind of a variation on this min-max trick, which is to use max, min-if and max-if. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 columns here. One, in our data set, we happen to have associate degrees and certificate degrees. So I'm going to be able to further disaggregate those. So I can add a column that says associate number 1, and another one that says associate number 2. And then I could add 2 more columns, certificate number 1, certificate number 2. And that allows me to, now I'm able to capture 4 different degrees. So I've kind of increased my capabilities. So what I'm going to do is here in my associate degree number 1, instead of just saying, give me the min value of degree and major, I'm going to say, give me the minimum value only if the credential type is an associate's degree.
Hey, Alan. You
yes.
also have a question that came in that is, since these are non-numeric fields, what determines the min and max?
Yeah, great question. So what determines the min and max is just their alphanumeric order. So the min value would be, it'd be like if you were sorting it A to Z. So it's just their alphanumeric order. You can kind of further expand that min-max. We won't have time to go into it today, but you can kind of further expand that min-max to include a date component. So you could say, you could code associate number 1 as the earliest, the associate degree corresponding with their earliest degree date. So you could do something like that. But just saying min of degree would give you the lowest alphanumerically sorted degree name. Max degree would give you the highest alphanumerically sorted degree. So hopefully that helps to answer your question. Let me know if there's anything else on that. But yes, on this solution here, you know, if I were to build out, so I already have, you know, min associate degree. I could add another one that is kind of the same as what I did before, where I do if the minimum associate's degree is not equal to the maximum associate's degree, only in that case display the associate's degree, the second associate's degree. So you can do things like that, and then you can see how I could use that same methodology to add certificate number 1, certificate number 2. So that min-max solution gives you that ability to flatten certain types of data. We use this a lot in things like if students or customers or whoever, they might have multiple phone numbers or multiple email addresses. Take email addresses, for example. In the database, a person might have multiple email addresses. One email address might be coded as like their personal email address, and another email address might be coded as their work email address. So we can flatten those because those are going to appear on 2 different records in the table. We can flatten them by using something really similar to this. We can say max if email type equals personal, then show the email. And then we add another column, max if email type equals work, then show the email. So you can do that kind of thing to sort of flatten it. Those conditional if statements in web intelligence just generally are extremely useful. But again, we have this case where we're still kind of limited, this min-max trick, although we can sort of manipulate it in certain ways to get more and more columns. It's never going to be able to capture all of the columns that we need, potentially, depending on your data. So if you have the type of table where you've got a customer who might have 30 different purchases, or a manager who has 15 different reports, you want to be able to flatten that. Well, with that kind of volume of data, the min-max trick might not work so well. So you might want to explore other options. So we're going to look at that now. So we're going to look at some other variations on this. So one variation is that you can use a measure. You can create a measure in your universe that aggregates, aggregates in quotes, kind of aggregates or rolls up different values. So we'll take a look at this trick. In my universe here, I have a folder called degrees awarded. That was the folder we were pulling from in that other report. And in our report, we were showing majors, list of majors that the student had. Well, we've got this other measure that I created called list of majors. Now, typically a measure would be a numeric value. It would be taking a sum or an average or something like that of an actual number. But you can kind of manipulate this a little bit to actually do concatenation. All right. So I've created a measure here called list of majors. And I've made it a measure, and I've told it to be a sum. Okay. And in my little select statement here, if you can see that, I have a formula that says take the credential plus the major plus a comma. And because this is a sum, it's going to add them together. So it's going to sort of plus them together. And when you add strings together, text together, what you're doing is you're concatenating values. All right, so if I take, if a student has 5 different majors, I would take major number 1 plus major number 2 plus major number 3, etc. That's going to create just one string of text. All right. So it's kind of a cool way to aggregate things. So I've got that field here, list of majors. Notice that when I hover over it, it says it's text, but it's a sum. So it's kind of a cool little trick. So you'll see here how that's going to work. If I take that list of majors field, which again is just a measure, I drag that over into my table. Now you'll notice those people who had multiple degrees, like Adam Engel, for example, they have their 2 degrees listed in just one box. Associate of Neurobiology, comma, certificate of medical scientist. Okay, so he's got those 2. Now, if Adam Engel had 50 degrees, they would all be displayed in this box. Degree number 1, comma, degree number 2, comma, degree number 3, and so on. And again, that comma came from the formula that I plugged into the universe field. Okay, so that's a cool little trick that you can kind of remember. Yes.
Someone had asked if you could just show the universe object one more time.
Yeah, sure. So this is what the universe object looks like here in the business layer of my universe. I've got the formula here. I have the type set to measure, and I have the function set to sum.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so we've looked at cross tables that you can use to kind of flatten stuff. We've talked about the min-max trick that you can use to flatten things. Min-max is a little bit limited. The min-max trick is only good if you have kind of reliably few number of data elements. If you know that each customer or student or person or whatever is you're only going to need to flatten out maybe one or two different things. So, and then we looked at this this measure trick where it's not numeric, it's really just concatenating strings, concatenating text. This is good. It's very dynamic. It can handle any number of things. So, so that's good. That's an option that you can take a look at. Those are all good web intelligence-based options. Depending on the complexity of the data that you need to flatten, you might then also look at different SQL options. Because you can write a SQL query that does some of this processing for you, and then plug it back into your web intelligence report using Freehand SQL. If you're comfortable with SQL, that's a really good option because then the SQL is always going to be more flexible, a lot more powerful generally. So you could use that as an option. I'm going to show you two different solutions for that. Again, we're talking about situations where we have data that's duplicated. We want to flatten it or pivot it or consolidate it. So if you're using SQL Server, and so if you're using SQL Server, there's this really cool aggregate function called string ag, meaning string aggregate. This operates on the exact same kind of philosophy as that measure trick I showed you. Basically, what string ag does, it's an aggregate function in SQL, just like sum or min or max or count, but it doesn't operate on numbers, it operates on text. And so it'll kind of concatenate things together. Again, same philosophy as the measure trick that I showed you. You may not see this though in your local version of SQL Server. This is a newer function. I believe it was introduced in SQL Server 2018. So if you have something prior to SQL Server 2018, this will be a good excuse to move to SQL 2018 or higher. But string ag is such a cool new function that you can use. Basically, how this works here is I've got in here a query that's pulling from the degrees awarded table. It's joining to the person table. I'm going to spit out the ID of the person, so the ID of the graduate, the name of the graduate, and then I'm going to group on those two things. So meaning that I'm just going to have one row per ID per name, one row per graduate. And then this string ag function is going to take all values they have in the major field, and rather than showing them in one row, the next row, the next row, it's going to concatenate them. It's going to show major number 1, comma, major number 2, comma, major number 3, etc. You can define the delimiter. I define the delimiter here as a comma, but you can do anything you want. So here, if I go ahead and run this query, you'll notice now some of these people that have multiple degrees, like Eddie Butler, their majors are now concatenated, flattened. So Eddie Butler is displayed on just one row, but it says neurobiology, comma, medical scientist. So that's just one piece of data that you can easily pull into your report and won't duplicate anything. Again, you can play around with that delimiter. You don't have to use a comma. You could use something like an ampersand or whatever it is that that works best for you. But that string ag function is extremely valuable. Another SQL solution, just one last thing here before we wrap up. Another SQL solution, if you don't have access to that string ag function, or perhaps you're using something like Oracle that doesn't have that, you can also use the row number trick. So what this does, and I won't go into huge detail on this, but there's a row number and partition by, these are called window functions. What this allows you to do is it allows you to scan the degrees awarded table and kind of just enumerate each one of a student's majors. So you'll assign a number to each one of a student's majors, and then you can query that and sort of say, okay, show major number 1, add a comma, show major number 2, add a comma, etc. And it produces much the same result. It's just more complicated than the string add function. So there are many different SQL options, but these are a couple of them. In any case, though, if you have a SQL query that does that kind of flattening for you, then what you can do, the beautiful thing is then you can just take that into Web Intelligence, add it in as a freehand SQL query like I did here, and now you can report off of that. So you can see here I've got this tab, which is list of graduates, freehand SQL. This is showing me the output from my SQL query, and here's Adam Engel again, and I see neurobiology, medical scientist. That's just a single piece of data that I got that was already pre-aggregated for me in the SQL query. So yeah, so various options. Across tables good for flattening things. The min-max trick is good for limited amount of flattening, and then SQL is always a good, powerful, flexible solution as well. Yeah, I think we might have one other question, Heather.
We did. Yeah, I was kind of holding on because, let you wrap up. It goes back to the list of majors, the measure trick that you showed. They were asking, won't this group by credential? What if the person has multiple credentials?
Are we talking about the SQL option or this option?
I believe it was the measure option in Webby. So yes. Yeah, it would be this one, I believe.
Yeah. So if they have multiple credentials, multiple majors, they're just listed once. So in this particular example here, I have just each student is listed just once in the table, and then I pulled over this list of majors measure, and what it's going to do is it's going to look at each student, because that's the only, it's basically for each person ID, for each name, for each city, for each state, that combination of fields, it'll then give me the corresponding concatenated list of majors. So yeah, in that sense, based on this particular design won't result in any student being listed multiple times.
Is that because it's a measure that it rolls up like that?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's because it's a measure, and it's because it's a sum. So it's basically in SQL or kind of just any programming, I guess, summing text is the same as concatenating text. So it's just going to kind of roll up like that because it's a measure.
Okay. We have a bunch of questions coming in now. So the next one up is actually, so the person that had asked that also said that you do have credentials in the query. So that makes sense, I think.
Yeah.
And okay. The next question is, can a derived table in the universe be used instead of freehand SQL?
Yes, yeah, you can. You can write your query. So like, let's say, for example, I write my query here like this. I like it, and let's say I could plug it into a web intelligence query using freehand SQL, or yes, I could copy this SQL, put it into a derived table, and pull it into the universe. However, I'm not a huge fan of using derived tables, so you might consider instead making it like a SQL view or a materialized view. It'd be a little bit more efficient probably, but either way, same philosophy. And so yes, you absolutely can.
Okay. And then the final question is, can you create that measure within the report, or does it have to be done in the universe?
Yeah, that's a great question. My experience is that you have to create it in the universe. I've tried creating it in the report. I don't think I've tried it in 4.3, so I'm not sure, but it's my experience that it has to be done inside of the universe.